What's up, everybody? Here we are, day 2 of the I'm Curious to Know project. I'm very excited to have Brenda Martinez with me today. Yesterday, as we mentioned, or as you may have seen, Ryan and Des Linden, so 2 US Olympians 2 days in a row. I feel very, very privileged. Brenda, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Trav?
I'm really good. I feel really good. It's a sunny, beautiful day here. I got a run in this morning. I got to go out and play with my daughter outside. So yeah, life's good. And now I get to have a conversation with you and learn more about you, which I'm really excited about as well.
Okay, awesome.
Now we were introduced by Kevin Quadrosi, also known as Q from New Balance. My wife works at New Balance, so he was kind enough to make the introduction. And just to prove that sports marketing works, I decided to wear my New Balance.
There you go.
Here today, my Hawaii shirt. So I'm repping Team New Balance. Now, I know you've been a long time New Balance athlete. Tell me kind of how meaningful that relationship is, and how happy you are to have their support.
Yeah, they've had my back since I graduated college, like right then. This year is going to be 10-year, the relationship that I've had with them, and they've been super consistent and just always treating me like family. And I'm just very grateful to have a sponsor that, regardless of what's going on, they're still going to support me, whether that's an injury or just whatever it is. They have my back. My boss can call me anytime he wants, which is nice. And I just feel reassured being with a company like them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. We got our first comment here from friend John Young. The only shoes I wear are New Balance.
Awesome, thank you.
Welcome, John. John's an amazing athlete as well. His story is fantastic. He's done a bunch of Boston marathons. I'll share a little bit of his story later on as well. But he's an amazing athlete. So thanks for joining us, John. Appreciate it. Now, I want to talk about motivation. I want to talk about obviously we're in the current climate we're in, the current circumstances we're in. We talked to Des yesterday, and she talked about her pity party after finishing 4th at the Olympic trials and just missing out on the team, and then rolling into isolation and quarantine. So she kind of had a double whammy. Tell me about your motivation. I know it's hard to keep going when events are cancelled and postponed and pushed back and things like that. So what's your experience been with that kind of waning or roller coaster of emotions around motivation?
Of course, it was kind of like sad thinking that we had to push things back, and I feel like my fitness is coming along, but I think we just had to readjust things, and now we're just building up all over again. I'm not really on the track. I can do anything that I want, like just out of the house. I just do roots around the neighborhood, so I'm grateful for that. But when it comes to racing, I think it's just safe to push everything. If that's the fall or if it's next year, then I'm okay with that as well, as long as my family's safe and whatnot. I haven't seen my family since early February, and I'm okay with that, as long as they're safe. And but yeah, it's definitely been tough, like trying to stay motivated. So I don't want to make it too much about running all the time. I think you can get so wound up in your head saying like, I have to do this, I have to work out to stay fit, not knowing what's going to, unfold in the future. But I just try to stay busy in the house. I try to journal. I try to spend time in the garage. I have all my tools in there and a bunch of wood. I like woodwork and whatnot. So that's kind of been keeping me busy, my mind off of things.
Yeah, I love your style. I think you're right. I think that the hardest thing that I personally have found, and I know talking to a lot of other athletes and other people, is it's kind of the uncertainty. Like if you had an injury and you said, okay, it's going to be 3 months off, or you're going to have to rehab for a month or what have you. I think we can wrap our head around that. But when there's no finish line in sight, there's kind of no end in sight. I think that's the biggest part that's been a struggle for me.
Yeah, exactly. Because you want to, at least you have an idea of what's going to happen, especially with an injury, like, how much time, how much rehab you need to put in. But something like this, it's very unpredictable. So I think the best thing I can do is just act like there's going to be a season in the fall. And hopefully that can be my attitude, even if something doesn't happen or it does.
Yeah. And I love your perspective. Obviously, like all of these conversations we're privileged. We are, we're able to get outside and train, and we're able to do things that many, many people aren't able to. So, taken with a grain of salt of perspective as well. it's nice to hear that, that's an important part, is family,
Oh, yeah.
friends are healthy and safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Now tell me about, you're up in Big Bear Lake. It's kind of an unknown spot, so maybe you don't want to talk about it. Maybe you don't want too
No,
many
we
people
could.
to come
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Don't go. It's a terrible place. I feel like it's an underrated altitude location. Everyone talks about Boulder. Everyone, Mammoth. We talk about Flagstaff. We've got all these other places in the US that people go to, but Big
Yeah.
Bear is at altitude as well, and it seems like you've built a pretty good life up there for yourself.
Yeah, it's very close to home. It's about an hour away from my hometown of Rancho Cucamonga. So my family's right down the mountain. But it's perfect for me. I get to drop down to sea level for track workouts. Well, at least not right now, but it's about a 55-minute drop down to sea level. So we can get from 6,700 feet down to 300 feet, which is kind of unheard of in the US. I know Flagstaff, they go down to Sedona. It's only maybe a couple thousand feet lower, but I think it's perfect for a middle distance athlete because my training is so specific with pacing and speed, and it's really hard to emulate that at altitude. So I always had the option of going down if I needed to, but it's perfect.
Yeah.
It's in Southern California, and it's a beautiful town, and I love it.
Yeah, close to home. And
Yeah.
I know you're very proud. I know you're proud of your heritage. I know you're proud of your family history. Tell me about that. Tell me what that means to you to have that heritage and to be proud of it.
Yeah. That's something I always think about on my runs. Like, this is why I run. Like, both my parents crossed over when they were very young. They were both teenagers. Not at the same time, but they were just looking to have a better life for themselves. And they started a family out here, and they just always been fighting and not with each other, but like fighting to survive and provide for their family. And that's always been the mindset that if you work hard, you can get whatever you want in life. So a lot of that's rooted just on how I was raised, and just wanting a better life for my family. And hopefully I can, I'm in the process of like helping them, but they don't want my help. Like, they want to still work and whatnot, but hopefully, like, my life's always going to be indebted to my family and the sacrifices they made to come over and better themselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's really interesting to hear people's whys, and I think that even in the 7 to 10 minutes we've been chatting, like there's a humbleness to you that doesn't come across in a lot of other athletes that you talk to, because their why is driven by money or results or fame or fortune or what have you. But I really get a sense from the way that you speak about your family and the way you talk about your why that that's not your motivation. Your internal motivation comes from wanting to be the best and help and support and bring light to the struggle that your parents went through to survive and fight their way through. So
and there's definitely like that sense of like, I don't ever want to feel like entitled, and I felt like my parents were really quick to shut me down if I ever act that way. But yeah, I always try to be humbled and what I've gone through, and whether it's good or bad. But it's always definitely a life lesson, especially growing up the way I did.
Yeah, very, very cool. Now, growing up, a lot of people are probably like this, but growing up, like I was lucky. My dad was an athlete, so I've kind of always, grown up running and grown up around sport. But a lot of people don't have that opportunity, and running or like running laps around the track is often a punishment for people at school. It's like you misbehave or you're not showing up, like go and do laps. Tell me about your experience, like coming up and kind of growing up and getting into running. And when did you first kind of know that you wanted to be a runner?
I actually didn't know I wanted to be a runner. I just would always run around a lot, but I was pretty bad growing up. I was pretty mischievous. Like, I just wouldn't listen. I'd be gone for like hours at a time. Even though my mom said, do not go outside, I can't keep an eye on you, I would just like disappear. So there'd be times where she would just get really upset with me. And I just, like, it got to the point where she would just try to chase after me and try to put me in the house. But I would just run next door because my grandma lived next door.
Right.
So I'd always just end up running away from my mom. And that's kind of how it all kind of started. Like, she mentioned to her coworker, I can't catch my daughter. She don't listen for anything. And her coworker just mentioned, why don't you just put her in track club? And I had never heard of it, but I was like, all right. And then, it just stuck ever since. And she looked at it as punishment, but I fell in love with the sport immediately.
Yeah, it's funny. I always laugh when like you hear those stories of people that, you were running away from your mom, or as punishment because you were like, you had so much energy and you were
Yeah.
mischievous, like, I'll go and run. And then all of a sudden you become a runner. When did that
You
click for
would've
you? When
thought.
did you, yeah, it
Yeah.
happened. When did it click for you? When did you realize, okay, there's some talent here. This is something I might want to pursue. Maybe it was not even talent. Maybe it was just passion. When did that kind of click for you?
I feel like it was always like some sort of like process happening. So even in high school, I had the same coach from the time I was 5 years old to my senior year. And growing up, he always mentioned, you can go to college and Brenna can pay for it. Your parents don't have to pay for anything. So that was kind of always in the back of my mind that I can go to college and graduate. And then once I went into college, I didn't know like how well of a runner I was going to be. I just knew I wanted to graduate. But I think once I started improving in my times and whatnot, I went to Europe my junior year in college and kind of got like my feet wet, knowing that, okay, maybe this is something that I want to do and maybe it's a possibility. So it was just like, okay, now I can take the next step and hopefully touch into the professional running world. So that's kind of how it happened. Yeah.
Yeah, so to me, like what I take from that, from hearing you, it was really very much about the process.
Oh yeah.
You found love and joy in it, and you kept showing up, and you just kept improving, and it was step after step after step. Is that true? Is that kind of how it all rolled out for you?
I mean, maybe back then I didn't see it that way, but
yeah,
not that I'm like scared to make big goals. I just like to at least achieve something that's kind of like attainable, kind of like right away, not right away or overnight, but maybe in that year or whatnot. But I still have these big goals in the back of my mind, but I try not to make it so like me crazy about it and whatnot, but at least be mindful of it. But at the same time, I like taking steps to plan towards that.
Yeah. Well, you've achieved some pretty big goals in your time, so I wouldn't discount or downplay those, which you're not. But obviously, world championship medal, Olympian. Tell me about, firstly, what was it like, on the bigger stage, winning a medal at the World Championships? What was that like? What was that experience like for you?
It was definitely like me testing myself. My coach, Dr. Joe Vigil, we had already been working 2.5 years, and we were at the World Championships in Moscow. He didn't go. My husband didn't go. I think they had trained me so hard in practice, and they just said, you need to learn to think for yourself and be independent. Like you can't rely on us being there, and because that's the way life's going to be. We're not like Coach Vigil is 90 now, and he always tells me I'm not going to be here for very long. So you need to know how to like think for yourself. And they kind of put me to the test when I went to Moscow. Like my husband or Coach Vigil didn't go. Not that I was like worried. I just trusted that I can hold my own, and I just got to listen and handle my business. So I feel like I handled it pretty well. We came home with a medal, and I was super excited to get on the phone once I was able to get to my phone, which was like maybe 2 hours after I had crossed that finish line. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure, well, maybe, back then, not that it was forever ago, but probably not as connected via social media and all of those things now. Where today it would be like, how many thousands of notifications would you have?
Oh, I know, right?
Yeah,
I think I just jumped on Instagram then, so it wasn't very big.
Yeah. That's funny how the world changes so quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And then obviously the pinnacle of the sport in track and field is the Olympics. A lot of people grow up, I've talked to a lot of athletes who actually grow up wanting to be an Olympian. Like that's the only thing they can think of. That's the all and end all for them. You talked about how your kind of love and passion for running kind of developed, but did you, once you realized that you had some goals, was it in the back of your mind that, one day I want to compete at the Olympics?
I think that's every kid's dream, but I was never like vocal about it. I'm like, I would never say like, I'm going to go to the Olympics one day. I would just, in my head, I'd probably keep it to myself. But I think once my career started progressing, then I kind of started seeing like, hey, maybe this is a possibility again. Like even in college, I made the Olympic trials my sophomore year. So that kind of, okay, maybe this is a thing and it can happen. And that's why I went to Europe my junior year to see if maybe I can continue running. But it was definitely in the back of my mind. Yeah.
What are some of your memories from that experience? Like, some of the athletes I talk to, it's, in the dining hall where you're watching LeBron James walk by, or like you're walking out in the Olympic team and there's, someone you looked up to. Tell me
Oh,
about
yeah.
some of your experiences. What are some of those moments you had where you were like, oh my goodness, I'm a fan, but I'm also part of this team?
Oh, there's a ton of them. There's probably a couple that come to mind. I remember we were going through team processing in Houston, and then we were there for like a day, and it was with different sports. It was just all Team USA, and then the next day we take a flight to Rio. So I remember sitting down and getting my ring size so I can get my ring. So I sat down at this table, and then someone sat next to me, and then there was two people that sat next to me, and I kind of just like looked like over, and then it was like Serena and Venus, and I was like, holy crap! I was like, oh my god, and I was like sweating like crazy, and then
Yeah.
I was like texting my husband. I was like guess what? Like they're sitting next to me. Like what do I do? He's like, stop being dumb. Like say hi to them. And then he's like, ask him for a photo because you're never gonna get the opportunity because once you get to Rio, they're probably gonna be like swarmed by so many crowds. And so I was able to like, I was super shy. I was like, can I get a photo? And they're like, yeah, they were super nice. So that was really sweet of them. And then I think there was another incident when it was weird, like the fire alarms at the, like, cause we were in building 20, like in, I guess they put countries like in different buildings, but Team USA had their own building. I think we were number 19 or 20. But the alarms kept going off like every single day. And I remember the gymnasts were like on a different floor and we were just going out of the, like down the staircase and they had like their medals in their boxes, like trying to protect their medals. But it was crazy, I feel like, but I feel like that's probably going to be like every Olympics, just insane and whatnot.
Yeah, wild. It's so wild. It's so like, as a fan of the sport and as a fan of sport, you know, watching the Olympics and you're glued to your TV for 2 weeks in a row and you kind of see these stories come from, but to be immersed in it and be a part of it must be, you know, obviously that's amazing memories that you hold.
Oh yeah.
What about competition? What about the competition where you know you stand on the track and the gun goes off? Like, is that kind of a moment of a release for you where it's like, okay, so much work, so much energy's gone into this, and now we're here, and now I can do what I'm really good at? Like, what was that kind of like? Was that an interesting feeling kind of leading up to the start of competition?
I mean, I was super proud, like being there, and of course, I wanted to perform better. I missed the final, but I think just like my whole journey, it was very hard. Like not everyone went through. I went through, like, you know, the trip at the Olympic trials, and I think competing those 10 days at the trials was such an emotional high that like I could not recover. Like I remember trying to rest for a few days, and I couldn't even finish workouts after that.
Right.
And then I was like, I just want to at least show fitness and not be tired when I get to the Olympic Games. And but regardless of like how I was feeling, I was very proud to go there and try to represent like the best of my ability. But yeah, that's something I always be proud of, and that's something that no one can take away from me. I can call myself an Olympian still. So
yeah. Well, I had an old boss of mine. Her name is Alison Forsyth, and she was a Canadian Olympic downhill skier. And I called her a past Olympian, and she's like, "No, there's no such thing as a past Olympian. Once an Olympian, always an Olympian." So I learned that lesson very quickly from her. Now tell me about. I'm really interested to know, because my background is in endurance sports, in Ironman triathlon and long distance running and long distance cycling. And the training is obviously very different. So I want to talk to you about, you know, what that's like. There's a lot of high intensity work that you go through, which to me equals a lot of recovery. Tell me about like, what's a typical in season, getting ready, testing your fitness type workout that you would go through?
So we do multi-pace training. So we train like, we'll do workouts that for quarter miles, you know, pace work. We do overspeed work. We train, you know, at marathon pace for like long workouts. We do anaerobic, aerobic tempos. So I feel like this type of training kind of exposes your weakness. And a lot of it for me has been like the strength work. I'm very impatient because I'm a miler and half miler. So I want to get the work done right away and not be out there an hour and a half. And that's kind of where my weakness is at. But at the same time, if I can adapt to those training, you know, with the mileage and the paces, then I know that's going to help me for my speed and for the 800 and the 15. So, it's just very different. So sometimes we'll do 8 or 10-day cycles just to get that extra work in. But the recovery is just as important. And I'm not scared to put my workouts. I put my paces and whatnot. Like I'm willing to share with people like the type of work that I do. There's no secrets to what I do. It's no gray area. It's black and white. Like, this is what we do, and these are the results we expect. So
yeah. It's an interesting thought because like, I don't know if you know Strava, but Strava is like this thing where people either, they're either super open about their workouts. They put their heart rate data on there. They put their power data on there. They put their pacing on there, or they're like behind closed doors and it's all a secret. Like it's going to stop anything. And I always think of like, and I don't know if this is correct, but I'm going to say it anyway, and people can fact check. But Bill Belichick might have said at some point, or some coach said, I feel good enough to give them the playbook that we have, and they have to be good enough to beat us. So it's kind of like that, where your workouts are your workouts. You still have to beat me.
Yeah, and like not everyone can simulate what I do. It's very hard. I feel like I have the right coaches in my corner, the environment, the attitude, and it's hard to emulate what I do. I feel like I live at sea level, I can train at sea level, and I live at altitude and whatnot. So, most of the time I put my workouts out there so people can learn. It's, and not everyone has like Strava or like a Garmin watch. So for those that don't have the resources, hopefully me putting my workouts out can somehow help them. So
that's really cool. And that kind of leads me to talk about your summer camp, or your camp that you host, where you're a mentor to some amazing high school and middle school runners. You bring them into your world, you teach them, you mentor them. Tell me about that. Where did that start? Why do you guys keep doing it? What are some of the most memorable moments you've had from those experiences?
So in 2012, I had a discussion with Coach Vihol. We'll just have like random talks, or if I don't know, we talk about life sometimes, but I had this question for him. I was like, Coach, I feel like I'm not really making an impact me talking to these schools. Like, I only spend like maybe 45 an hour just talking to schools, but I don't really know if I'm getting the message across to these young kids. And I didn't have a medal at the time either, but, and he just suggested, it just came out of his mouth like nonchalant. He's like, why don't you just have a girls camp? And I was like, oh my God, that's like the best idea ever. So I did all the planning for months, and we started it in 2013, and it was right before I went to Moscow. And I remember telling the girls, like, you can do whatever you want. Like, it probably seems so like, I don't know, cliche, but I was like, you can do it. And then like, I came home with a medal a few months later. So, now it's going to be, I think we just finished our 7th year. So it's going by pretty quick. And it's nice seeing the girls go to college, and now they're in their careers. Some of them are still picking schools, but I still have a good relationship with most of the girls that aren't too shy to reach out again. So
good. That's amazing. That's great. And obviously, current circumstances mean that it may not happen this summer, it may not happen in the fall, but I have seen that you've continued to stay in touch with these high school teams. You're doing, Instagram lives or FaceTimes with them and Zoom calls. Yeah. Tell me about that. Obviously, you're still connected to the community as best you can, given what we're all going through.
Yeah. When it comes to my girls, they have my number. Sometimes they think they have to schedule an appointment. I'm like, no, like, call me. Like, I'll call you back if I miss it. But sometimes they call me if they're having a bad day, and sometimes they just need me to listen, and that's all it takes too. I just want to be a good friend to them as well.
Yeah.
Or if they need advice or whatnot, if they ask for it. But yeah, I think now's the time to kind of be there for people, even though we physically can't be there. I'm trying to take that next step to at least reach out to my community and see what I can do. I think every Monday now we're going to schedule 4 to 5 schools, and me just having like conversations like this where they ask me questions, whether through it's Google Hangout or Zoom. So that'll be kind of like my community service, and I think they'll keep me sane and connected. So
I think it's great. I think it's good. One, I talked to Lauren, my wife, about it. I was like, this is what she's doing, and she's like, this is amazing. She also wondered, like, obviously it's a great thing you're doing, but to be so available and there for people is obviously like a draw on yourself, and you're giving a lot of your energy to those girls. And I know that you probably wouldn't trade it for the world, but there's probably times where you're like, oh man, I just need to like switch my phone off or get away or get, have some silence and be by yourself.
Even when camp happens, I always feel like I need it more than them. And they're going to say the opposite as well, but like, I get so much out of it, and it makes me feel good. And I feel like it kind of gives me my second win to kind of finish out the, the season and whatnot. Cause I end up having it, right after nationals, but it kind of puts me in my place, and it keeps me grounded doing all those things for the girls. And again, I have the support, from New Balance. They're crazy supportive. Like the girls get 3 pairs of trainers and ton of outfits, of backpacks and whatnot. So they look pretty cool when they get their gear. And
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, that's great. I'm sure it's super meaningful for them too. So kudos to you for doing that and taking that on. And hopefully, we can get back to some normality and you can continue to host. Tell me about some of the maybe. Well, let's change tack. I know you're back at school. I know you're back in college. You're just about to finish up your master's. Tell me about what that's like. How are you kind of combining all of the things that you're working on?
I actually didn't think I'd ever go back to school. To be honest, I felt like I took it a little bit for granted in college, doing my undergrad. But my husband kind of was like, "Why don't you get your master's?" And I was like, "No, I don't know. Like, I'm too busy, but I do have the time. I just have to prioritize." And that's me getting up a little bit earlier to get training done than I have to. I can't be lazy. And I felt like maybe I should do it. I think it'll keep me accountable and maybe just keep me busy. And I'm going to graduate this summer. So it's going by pretty quick. I took an extra class, so I can get that out of the way, and I just have my capstone next semester and I'll be done.
Yeah. Very cool. If I get a sense that you're probably like a lot of people listening, that the more stuff you have on the plate, the better you are. So like it gives you focus. If you're idle and you've got time on your hands, then maybe you're not your best. So I get a sense that focus helps.
Yeah, I mean, it stresses me out, but I think it's a good stress.
Love it. We did have a comment. Lulu said that her daughter Sydney met you last year at a group that Coach Mendoza took to Cali, and she mentioned that you're an inspirational leader. So nice. Shout out. Thanks for the message.
Yeah, Lulu. I remember they came to picture. Yeah, they were from Texas. So I think they spent time in Los Angeles, and they decided to drive up, and I was like, yeah, I'm for it. I was like, I'll come talk to your team. So they made the trip.
Yeah. Very cool. That's awesome. I'm sure you actually really enjoy following along the journeys of these girls as well, and seeing them go to college and go to work and maybe pursue a running career or what have you. I'm sure it's super rewarding. Now you've mentioned your team a few times. You mentioned your husband Carlos. You mentioned Coach V. It seems like you have a really good network of people around you that are able to guide and help you. How important is that to you? How much has that kind of led to your success as an athlete, having that core group that really supports and helps you?
It's with Coach Vijo, like I don't like taking too much of his time because he is 90 now. So I spend a lot of my time with my husband, who's kind of his eyes. And at first it was really, really hard, working with your husband and him kind of, he would yell at me in training. But I think it was just a good relationship for him to push me. And I feel like he's maybe the one to push my buttons as well, but he would still get the best out of me. And I think that's one of the main reasons for my success is having someone like that and who's really good at separating that relationship, whereas I wasn't at the beginning. But it's really hard. It's a hard relationship, but I know what I want out of this career, and I feel like I can get the most of it if I trust both my husband and Coach Vihel. But yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like not many people can do it. It's really tough. Kudos if you can do it. I know how hard it is. But yeah, it's pretty much like just all trust. Like even when things are going bad, like I'm not going to turn my back on them or anything or change the situation or anything. I'm like, these are the cards that I was dealt with right now, and we'll figure it out. So we'll get out of it somehow.
Yeah, it's good perspective. I coached my wife for a little while. She's a runner, but she was getting into doing some triathlons, and I set her a program and we were coaching, and we'd go swimming, and it didn't last very long because same thing. I'd push her or I'd tell her something, and like it was best that we just parted ways on the coaching arrangement.
I understand it's hard.
Yeah, good for you guys for making it work.
Motivated when it's someone that you see a lot, different relationship, but yeah, it's definitely hard.
Yeah. Well, good for you guys for making it work. Now, another piece of proof that sports marketing works is I know that you're a Cerecore. Is that how you say it?
Circuit core. Yeah.
Circuit core athlete. Forgive me.
No.
I know that they. Tell me how that plays into, because I use Whoop. I'm a Whoop user, and I think that really helps kind of track my recovery and heart rate variability, so I know when to push. Those type of things. Tell me about like how much of that's played into your training now. Do you look at those numbers and realize, okay, today's a day I need to just dial it back a little bit? How much are you relying on that data? There you go. You've got it.
Yeah, it's been really key, like in my training. It has 7 biomarkers, so a lot of it gives you numbers like your hemoglobin's like the main thing. Like you don't have to draw blood to get the results, and take it to a lab and wait a couple days and whatnot. But this one's non-invasive. You get the results within a minute. But yeah, in the beginning, I was using it a lot just to kind of get my baseline and understand like where my averages are at. And it's still hard for me to kind of understand like what they mean, but I've learned like over the years, like, hey, like my hydration's not great. Like I need to hydrate right now. My oxygen content could be better, or respiratory rate. My hemoglobin like is really low because this workout like took so much out of me. If I take it in the mornings, knowing that there's a big workout, it will tell me like if I'm ready to attempt the workout. There hasn't been too many days like that because I'm so consistent in taking it. But it's rare. Like if I'm like, I can't work out, like it's like, I'll be able to work out most of the time because I'm keeping track of my numbers. And I'll take extra precautions. Like if I'm really tired, then I can jump in the hyperbaric chamber, and just go in there and sleep for like 2-3 hours, and I'll be ready to go like the next day. So it's definitely a big recovery tool for me and the decisions I make in training.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think that there's so much of it that still comes down to gut and instinct and knowledge and experience. 100%. There's no replacement for that. So even like some of the coaches, the athletes that I've worked with or coached over the years, is the reliance on too much data sometimes becomes overwhelming. So there is an element of trust your gut, trust your knowledge, but to have these tools that really help, like the final piece or the final percent, I think is really a great time to be an athlete for sure.
Yeah, and I try not to get too obsessive with it, but I do try to like share with the audience, like, hey, this is how my body's feeling, and sometimes I don't know how I'm going to feel once I actually start warming up. But with this one, it kind of takes the majority of the guessing out.
Yeah, and to your point too, like I've woken up days where the numbers are bad, like your recovery score is terrible, like, and then you can kind of like trick yourself into like not wanting to do the workout or like sandbagging it. So it's like, it's kind of also like sometimes you just have to like put it aside and use your mindset to say, okay, like the numbers are the numbers, but today I need to like just go for it, and you kind of get yourself through it as well.
Oh yeah, that happens too. Like even if they're slightly off, I think it's okay to work out. But if they're like terrible, then it's like, don't do it. Don't be dumb. Go work out.
Yeah. I actually read an interesting study. So this is definitely not double blind proven, but because of the Whoop that I use, they can actually track respiratory rate. And they noticed in a bunch of people that had a significant increase in respiratory rate over a period of 2 or 3 days actually ended up contracting or testing positive for COVID-19. So they've built up this massive data set that proves that they can show kind of ahead of time, if your respiratory rate goes from 14 or whatever to 18 overnight, then there's something really big happening. And in a number of those cases, it's actually proven to be COVID-19. So definitely not proven study, but they've got a pretty good data set to prove that. So it's interesting how this kind of like sports technology has now transformed or transformed into something else. So
wow.
Side note, interesting side note.
Crazy,
Tell me about that mindset. We talk a little bit about it, of like, you sometimes just have to put it aside and just go for it. Like, what's that mindset that you feel like you have that drives you to just get better every day? Like, where do you tap into? What do you tap into? How does that develop in yourself?
A lot of it's self-talk. I try to block out any negative thoughts of like, maybe I can't do it today. I'm not feeling my best. sometimes it's just me just talking positive to myself, and literally like if I'm thinking negative, I'll tell myself like stop, like do not even go down that path. And it's definitely hard to get out of it, but for the most part I can, if I'm just like just relax my shoulders and take deep breaths, and I can get to that level. It might take some time, but I always just try to prime myself by the time I wake up, you know, what kind of day I want and what I can actually control that day. I try not to think about tomorrow or tomorrow's workout and whatnot. So I try to do what I can control today, and not get too ahead of myself. So
yeah, it's a great lesson. I think it's, you know, it's always about controlling the controllables and what's in front of you. And, you know, when you're in that moment, like what are the things that you can check off, you know, your breathing, your technique, your attitude, those type of things, and self-talk. So it's really cool to hear that. One thing that I've seen in athletes that I've spoken to that are at your level and have achieved amazing things in their career is that they're super uber competitive, and that they would race you around the block just for no reason. Is that something that you think about in yourself? Are you a competitive person? Are you a racer? Are you kind of like standing on the start line going, I will beat you?
Yeah, like maybe championship races, I'm probably obviously more competitive. But I try to have fun for the most part. You know, you have to enjoy what you're doing. But yeah, you get some interesting things like around you, like especially when you start competing with other people. Like, yeah, I mean, there's people that play mind games too. Like there are people that will. There's like a coach in particular, like he'll have his athletes warm up next to me, and I'm like in the most random spot, like warming up, and they'll literally like sit next to me, and it's like, I don't know what you're doing. Like I'm ready to race. Like you're worried about me. Like worry about the race, you know. But yeah, just trying to control what I can control, and that's my thoughts, I feel like. And again, it's just about having fun.
Yeah, love it. What's the most memorable race you've had? Obviously, we talked about the Olympics. We talked about medaling at the Worlds. Are they, you know, would they be on the list, or is there another race, another moment where you're actually most proud of that, you know, maybe was not one of those on the big stage where you had to kind of dig deeper or whatever? I'll let you kind of roll from there. What's your most proudest race and moment you've had?
I would say those 10 days at the Olympic trials. I think both finals. I think that period was definitely like something that got me to my core, like where it affected me deeply, but I somehow found a way to rebound from all that. And again, it was just keeping my mindset intact. And I felt like I was able to do that with the support that, you know, my coaches, my family. Again, it was just about me not feeling sorry for myself, knowing that that was something I couldn't control. Like I couldn't control getting tripped. And even when I finished, I wasn't even trying to blame anyone. I was like, well, the team's made, like, what can I do? The only thing I can do is move on and move forward. I have the 15th to look forward to. And I knew I wasn't going to be the most rested and whatnot. But again, I think the mind's a very powerful thing. And I was kind of relying on that too. I was like, my mind can get me there. I know my body's probably going to be a little bit beat up, but I just trusted it. I trusted my coaches. And I was actually happy like those 10 days. And it probably took me, you know, the 800 final. I was a little bit sad that day, but I was like, there's no point. Like, I'm going to move on. I'm going to continue with the routine that I've been doing. And and that kept me up. You know, I was reading a lot. I was journaling still. It was interesting. I felt like I got to know myself more and know what I'm capable of. Yeah.
How much of that experience have you been able to translate going forward, you know, even into the mentoring with the girls and kind of teaching them about that ability to keep moving forward when you think there's no hope? Like how much of that has been able to like translate into the way you live your life now and what you're sharing with others? Yeah,
I think a lot of times it's one of the topics we cover in camp is confidence. You know, it's really hard to attain it, but if you can take the steps and change that mindset, like the mindset's everything. Like I even give him like a Carol Dweck book, The Mindset. And I tell him to read it over and over again. And I tell him, you know what, we're humans. We are going to make mistakes. We're going to have adversities, but you got to take them as speed bumps. That doesn't mean that it stops there. You just, maybe it might take a little bit longer to get to your destination, but just roll with it and keep that mindset intact, because that's the one thing that's going to kind of hold you over and get over that speed bump. But if you start thinking negatively, like you're not going to go anywhere. I promise you that. So I know it's a little bit of tough love, but I try to share my story with the girls, and if they can go home a little bit more enlightened, then I feel like I'm doing a good job. But again, I always tell them, reach out to me if you're having a bad day, or maybe you need a pep talk or something before a race. But it's definitely a lot of practice.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I see your social media, and you're super motivational, and you're super encouraging, and you're sharing some, the insights into your life, and it's always from a place of positivity and wanting to lift other people up. So I appreciate you sharing that story. I appreciate the way that you go about your business on social media and helping other people out. Now, before I do let you go, I do have 3 questions. They're going to be the same questions every day on the I'm Curious to Know project. So the first question is, what's one thing that's happened during isolation that is new that you want to keep once we go back to this new normal?
Oh man. I don't know. I feel like not much has changed, but like, I don't know, like family, like it has everything to do with family. Like I can't wait to get back to my family and my nephew. Like my nephew's getting big now. He's already 2, and I just want to visit them more than anything, and have them come out more. But right now that's not even a thing. So I don't want to take my family for granted ever again.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's well said. I think that's that's a big one for a lot of people. That especially I get a sense that you're super close as it is. So the fact that you're now not able to be together, that's probably even harder for the people that are maybe some estranged that now kind of miss them as well. So
I've been sending them like packages and stuff. Like I bought my niece a sewing machine, and my nephews are into puzzles and like punch needle stuff, like craft stuff. So I've been doing that for them and sending it. So they're staying busy. So
that's cool. That's awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing when you reunite. I'll follow along on social to see you guys when you reunite. Next question. What's one thing that you thought was important before isolation and all of this went down that you're happy to leave in the past?
Probably eating out. I used to always eat out. Like that was just a part of me being lazy and not cooking at home. But now that we try to go shopping every 3 to 4 weeks. But now it's like I'm eating healthier, and everything's holding me accountable. I'm getting up early, I'm cooking my meals, and I even cut weight. It wasn't intentional, but I did. I think it's just because I'm cooking at home and being more thoughtful in what I'm doing.
Yeah, very cool. Maybe you'll share some of your best recipes with us as well. Maybe we'll see that. And then final question. I'm curious to know what's been the most memorable, joyous moment you've had during this isolation quarantine, where you've kind of looked around, you've woken up, and you're like, man, I feel so fortunate and lucky to be doing what I'm doing or being who I am. Is one memory or moment stand out for you?
I think just waking up. Like honestly, every time I wake up, I'm like, I know I can go out and run. And a lot of my competitors, like I have a really cool relationship with Caster Semenya, so she'll hit me up time for time, and she's just like, I'm so jealous. Like I can't even get out the door. Like that's how bad it is here in South Africa. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like I have the luxury of going outside and just running around my block, and it's a 2-mile loop, and I take advantage of that. So I'm just lucky that I can wake up and I live in a town where it's pretty much secluded and I don't have any issues, and I can get the work done and whatnot and do things from the house. So definitely it's when I wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a sense, I love that answer, but I also have a sense that you probably have that attitude every single day of your life anyway, to some degree. You seem like that type of person to me, but I'll accept that as an answer.
Okay.
Brenda, this has been amazing. It's been super insightful. I have loved the conversation. I really appreciate you sharing. I appreciate the motivational and inspirational message that you have to share, and the fact you're actually sharing it. I think that's important to note. It's great to hear more about the story of Carlos and Coach V and the crew and the New Balance support. So this has been really fun, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
Oh no, thank you. Thank you for thinking of me.
Of course, thanks to Q for nominating you. As mentioned earlier, we will be going live every single day in May, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow, I have dear friend Charlie Engel. Brenda, this guy's story is pretty incredible. He was the first person to run across the Sahara Desert. He ran at least a marathon for 110 days in a row. He was a former recovered drug addict. He went to federal prison. He's done everything and more. So we're going to hear from Charlie tomorrow. So I look forward to that one. Brenda, you're awesome. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. And once again, thank you for your time.
Yeah, you and Lauren stay safe and the kiddos. So
Will do. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Okay. Take care. Chat soon.
Bye.
Bye.